right, so this week's lesson is all about the diminished scale, that really classy, jazzy sound that you can add to your blues. And we're going to talk about how you can add it to a straight up 1-4-5 blues format or the bigger, jazz chord arrangements. Either way, you can work in that sound. And then once you understand a few basic principles, it's really not that difficult. I did my research on this. I don't usually do this and kind of dig around and see what other guitar instructors were saying about it because I have my own take on it, but I wanted to hear what other players said about it. And there was a lot of information, but I couldn't connect the dots, or I had a hard time with it. And I'm assuming maybe some of you are in that same boat. I even saw a video of Robin Ford, and I love Robin. He's a great player, but when it came to explaining how to use the half-step, whole-step scale, it was sort of glazed past a lot of information. So this lesson is all about knowing when you can use that, when to get in and when to get out of the scale. That was the hardest part for me, is just figuring that part of it out. So we're going to break this down over the course of 2 videos. In this video, we're going to go through the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half and download the tablature for this, you can get those things by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP396. All right, so I'm looking at myself in the monitor here, and I'm noticing I probably picked the wrong shirt color to go with this guitar. It's just like one big shade of brown. It's kind of funny looking. Sorry about that. This guitar, by the way, people always ask, and I've mentioned this before, this is a Martin 017 1947. And I like to show this one just because you can see how beat up it is. I mean, this thing has just been, looks like it's been drugged behind a car. And actually, somebody's carved, there's the letter R, I don't know if you can see it, it's in like 3 or 4 spots in the guitar, just like an R. Somebody took a little pen or something. I don't know why you would do that. Probably a kid, but anyway, this guitar, it looks bad, but it is one of the best, cleanest sounds. It's just got that, it's all mahogany, so it's real mellow. I just love this thing. Every time I pick it up, it makes me happy. Okay, so let's start off and talk about the structure of what we're going to be doing here. So in a traditional blues, you have the 1-4-5 chord format. So we're going to be playing everything in the key of A. And in a traditional blues, it would sound like this. You'd have your 1, 4, 1. Hang out there, 4. Back to the 1. You know this, right? Then we go to the 5. Back to the 4. Back to the 1. That's your typical blues setup. Now, when we talk about this diminished scale, or arpeggio, we're going to be really playing the arpeggio more than anything. But I want you to first know where it works. So, and we're going to start off by just talking about the chord, because it's all based on chords anyway. So, we're playing this in the key of A. So the first time it happens is going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. And you play the sharp 1 diminished 7. So whatever your 1 chord is, you play the sharp diminished 7 of that 1. So in this case, we're playing an A chord as our 1. So you play the A sharp diminished 7. That's the pull, the tension that's created to release. That's what it sounds like. That's the A sharp diminished 7. It's tension, and then you release when you get to the 4 chord. You can feel that. And so that's the first step, is knowing when to use that A sharp diminished 7. And I'll explain when to use it in a minute here. But that's the first premise. There you got 1, 4, 1. A sharp diminished 7. Pull, or tension, and then release. There's the 4 chord. And then we do the sharp 4 diminished 7 to get back to the 1. So this is really it. Once you get this, you've got the whole thing. So you've got the 4 chord, the sharp 4 diminished 7, and then back to the 1. And you can see that little tension in it. It's just in one little measure, but it adds so much value. 1, 4, 1, 1 sharp diminished 7, 4, 4 sharp diminished 7, 1. Okay, that's the premise of everything we're going to be working on here. So the chord itself, the sharp diminished 7 chord, we're going to look at that A sharp diminished 7 first. So if I'm playing it here where I've got my bar on the 5th fret, that's my A chord using the E shape out of Caged, I play the sharp diminished 7 like that. So you can see I've got my middle finger and my index finger both in the same fret that I was barring. That's my anchor, my visual anchor that I use. So that's on strings 2 and 4. And then these other fingers, my ring finger and my pinky, fall into the strings in between. So that would be on strings 1 and 3 on the 6th fret. And it sounds like that. That's the A sharp diminished 7 chord. Another way to think about it is if I look at where my pinky is, there's the A sharp. So there's 4 notes in that chord, and one of them is obviously the A sharp. But if I move up 3 frets, I'm playing the same 4 notes, they're just in a different order. And the same thing happens 3 more frets and so forth. So this is a repeatable chord. There's a word for it, I can't think of it, but you can repeat that chord over and over again and get the same notes. They're just thrown into a different order. But for now, we just need to worry about playing it here because it's right in place with where our bar chord is. So there's your 1 chord. There's your sharp 1 diminished 7, or the A sharp diminished 7. And remember, that's the tension chord that brings us to the 4. There's the release of that tension. Now here's what's cool. To get us from the 4 chord back to the 1 chord, we're going to play the 4 sharp diminished 7. And that's the same exact chord that we just played, but it's just everything down a fret. So this is where it gets really easy to visualize. And the other way you can visualize this, the way that I'm thinking about it, is I'm connecting it to my D9 chord. So I'm thinking about playing a D9 where you've got, these 3 fingers here. That's basically making that same D7 shape that you would make in first position. But I've got my middle finger on the 5th fret, 5th string. And then I've got my pinky barring strings 1 and 2 on the 5th fret. So that's how I make a D9 chord. And the reason I'm mentioning the D9 is because where my pinky is, it's already in place. I just leave it there, and then these other fingers fall into place to make the sharp diminished 7 version of that chord. Hopefully that makes sense. There's your D. Here's your D sharp diminished 7, which is the tension you need to get you back to the 1 chord. If you can understand everything that I just said there, you get the premise of this whole thing. That's really what it is. Now the other part is knowing when it happens, so I'm going to go through that in just a second. But you have your 1 chord, 4, back to the 1, sharp 1 diminished 7 to the 4, sharp 4 diminished 7, back to the 1. You can see the little tensions that are created there. It's pretty cool. Now here's the part that nobody seems to want to talk about, and that is when it happens. So if I'm counting that out, and by the way, this has a quick change in it. That's what they call that, where you go from the 1 to the 4 quickly and then back to the 1. Some blues have that, and sometimes you just stay on the 1 chord and you don't do the quick change. It doesn't matter. The same premise applies that when it comes to playing the 1 sharp diminished 7. So it comes in here. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. Comes in on the 4, 4th measure. And then we go to the 4 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Comes in on the 2. And then we're back to the 1. That's it. Once you understand that, you don't have a whole lot of time to do that. So that's why it's difficult, I think, for a lot of people, is because you're trying to learn the scale or the arpeggio anyway. You're working out all the notes and trying to figure them out, and you've only got that 1 quick measure that's going to pass very quickly to be able to do anything with it. And so for that reason, it's very easy just to forego it and just stay in the minor pentatonic scale and let that be your lead. So now that you know that chord and roughly when it comes in or when you should be playing it, now let's talk about the arpeggio, because that's how we're really going to relate this. We're not going to strum the chord necessarily. We're going to play the notes out of that chord, which is the arpeggio. So there's different ways you can look at it, and I could spend a whole half an hour or more talking about the scale and all these different spots. But here's a very practical use, and everything that I played in the intro when I was playing came out of this one premise here. So we're going to start on the 5th fret 4th string, and then pinky on the 8th fret 4th string. There's your first 2 notes. Middle finger on the 6th fret 3rd string, 5th fret 2nd string. Now it sounds kind of weird, and it's going to feel weird in the beginning, but your fingers are going to start to fall into this quickly. Pinky goes back to the 8th fret, this time on the 2nd string. And then we're going to play these 2 notes. It would be 5th fret 1st string, 6th fret 1st string. That's really it. Every time you heard me do the run, it was coming out of that arpeggio. And what's really cool to me is this is the same as this, right? There's the chord, there's the arpeggio. Hopefully you can connect them in your mind. Where my index finger is for the chord, that's also where I started that arpeggio. Now, when I played the D sharp diminished 7, which was here, the same arpeggio scale or fingering works. I just slid everything down a fret. So that makes that very easy. Once you've learned it in one spot, you've kind of got it in both. And what's even cooler, to take this to a whole new level of awesomeness, is as I was showing you that you could take that chord and play it, every 3 frets up or down, you're playing the same chord. Same is true for any of these licks or arpeggios or scales. So if I'm playing the arpeggio here, where I start on that 5th fret 4th string, if I were to take that same fingering and move it up 1, 2, 3 frets, I'm now playing the same arpeggio just in a different spot. So as a lead player, I've got all these options, and this is just one view of the arpeggio. Obviously you can play it up and down the neck. You can play it across 1 string or 4 notes per string. There's all kinds of different ways you can do it. And hopefully light bulbs are going off for a lot of you, and you're realizing this one little shape that we've learned, now we can play that all over the neck. But remember, you've just got a small measure to be able to do it, so you don't have a whole lot of time, at least in this blues structure, to be able to mess with it. Alright, so that's the background information on the diminished scale and chord. Now let's get into the song that I played in the intro. So it starts off, by the way, we're going to be playing this in the key of A, but this first little lick, we're starting in like the minor pentatonic scale, really. So I'm in pattern 1 of minor pentatonic, starting on the 7th fret 4th string. We're going to play 4, 3, 4, both on the 7th fret, and then a quick hammer on between the 5th fret and the 6th fret on the 3rd string. And actually, if you wanted to go ahead and play strings 3 and 2 behind that bar there, that would work too. And then I threw in the chord. So it's kind of a call and response. We have a call, and then the response to that. And by the way, every now and then, I'll play this a little different every time I do it rhythmically, but what I'm trying to do is a little muted thing, to get a, like tapping your foot, get a little bit of rhythm going. And the chord that I'm playing is an A6 chord. Now, just play your A major bar chord, take your pinky off, and put it down on the 7th fret 2nd string. That's your A6 chord. You ever want to jazz up your chord, that one little tip there's another little sidebar for you, a little light bulb moment for some of you. Just take your pinky off and reposition it there. And actually, if you don't want to use the bar, some of you don't like playing bar chords, you can play it like this. And then you can slide it down from the A6 to the A9. You have all these options from that one little movement there. Okay, and then we go to the 4 chord, right? There's the quick change. And when we go to the 4 chord, I'm playing that D9 that I already talked about. Now, if you don't have time to cram all your fingers in and play that, you could just play the top 3 strings here on the 5th fret. That's a quick way to play a D9. So you got, right? And that works. Sounds a little more full when you do it that way. And then I came back here and went. So that's back to pattern 1 of that minor pentatonic scale. We're going to play 5th fret 2nd string, 7th fret 3rd string, back to the 5th fret 2nd string, and then 5th fret 4th string. But when I hit that, I pulled it sharp a little bit. And then pinky down on the 7th fret 4th string. And then I came down here to the 4th fret 4th string. That's something that's going to be confusing to some, because some of you will be going, hey, wait, you said minor pentatonic scale. That note's not in it. You're right, it's not, but it is in the major pentatonic scale for A. So if I look at the A major pentatonic scale pattern 1, right, that's where you just take everything and move it down 3 frets. That would be that note. So you can always step over the line into the major pentatonic scale if you're playing the minor. And any time you want to do that, if you're playing a major blues, and it sounds really good. That kind of thing. you're kind of going back and forth between major and minor, and it becomes one blended scale, really. Okay. Back to the 7th fret 4th string, and then another little hammer on there between the 5th fret and the 6th fret. We go back to that A6 chord again. So what we've just played there, if we're counting this out, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Here's the 4. Remember, this is where the diminished thing happens. So right here I go. Right? So that's when you start it, is right there on the 4th measure there. So we're gonna play that same arpeggio that I just showed you. We're gonna walk right up, starting on the 5th fret 4th string, all the way up to the 5th fret 1st string, 6th fret 1st string, and then a quick hammer-on pull-off between the 6th fret and the 5th fret. Back to the 8th fret 2nd string, and then watch this. Now that's walking up 5, 6, 7 on the 2nd string, and we're walking up to this note. Now that's where the song goes to the D chord, and that note is the 3rd interval in the D chord, and so that would be. And what I was doing is I'm picturing chord shapes here. So this is the mindset. So I'm picturing the top part of your A shape for D, and I can see that little triad there. And so any of those notes in that triad, I could have targeted any of them because they're all notes in the D chord. I could have done the 1st, 5th, or the 3rd. So back to the arpeggio. And then after that, I came down and hit the 7th fret 3rd string. And because those notes are in the D chord. So you can see what's going on here is knowing when to get in and when to get out of that arpeggio. I showed you when to start it. And how do I get out of it? How do I relate this to the 4 chord? Well, I just have to find, I know the 4 chord's coming here. I just have to find one of those notes that's in that 4 chord. And that's a great spot for it. Okay, and then after that, then I hit the D9 chord again. Just like that. Let's take it from the beginning. We have Now remember, this is where I can play the D sharp diminished 7 to get back to the 1 chord. But you don't want to overplay the diminished thing. I guess so I hinted at it. I started it. So I started that same shape, just like the arpeggio there, but I moved it down here, right? There's our D. But I didn't play the whole thing. I just went 4th fret 4th string, 7th fret 4th string, and then 4th fret 3rd string, up to the 5th fret 3rd string. And then we walked it back down. So, and then watch this. So I went right back into the minor pentatonic scale. You can do that. You can choose when you want to jump on or off any of these trains. So you can think of this as like a subway station with all these trains coming through. And I can jump onto the minor pentatonic scale. If I want that bluesy thing, I can work in the major pentatonic scale or the diminished thing. So when I come to that 7th fret 4th string, I hit it with my pinky, and then strings 2 and 3 with my pinky. 2 and 3 on the 5th fret, 7th fret 4th string, 4th fret 4th string, back to the 7th fret. So it's back to the A6 chord. Okay, now this is where we're going to hang out on the A for a little bit, and I went. So I came down to the A position down here. This is a great little country kind of lick. So it's open 5th string, which is your A note, slide up to the 4th fret 5th string, and it's a box here. Then we're on the 4th string, we have frets 2 and 4, and then we go up to the 3rd string, fret 2. That's a bluegrass lick too. Right? It's a great little lick though. And then I walked it down. So that would be with my pinky on the 5th fret 4th string, 4th fret down to the 2nd fret on the 4th string. Now watch this. That's where I walked it back to the E. So we're going to the E chord, the 5 chord. And when I did that, from here I switched fingers actually and used my middle finger, 4th fret 4th string, up to the 5th fret, up to the 6th fret. And then my index finger can go down on the 5th fret 2nd string. Now some of you are going, wait, what's going on here? What is this? Well, I was thinking about my E7 chord, right? Those are just 2 notes in the chord. This is why picturing those chords is key to the whole thing. I could have also played... I could have played it down here. Just played an E7 there as well. But I wanted to come back into position because I knew I was going to finish out my solo up here. So there's those 2 notes. Back to the 6th fret 4th string. My pinky goes down right here on the 7th fret 3rd string. And you can see that's just that E7 chord. But I didn't use my ring finger there. Okay, now here's the last diminished thing. And it's one we've already done. It's going to be the same arpeggio that you've already played, so nothing new is introduced here, just the concept. So when we go from the 5 chord in a traditional blues, the next chord would be the 4, right? But you can substitute, instead of playing that 4, you can play the 4 sharp diminished 7 arpeggio. So I could have went to the E7, to that chord, which is the D sharp diminished 7, back to the 1, because it's just a tension and then a release. So after this, I went back to that same arpeggio. It's the exact same lick that we played to get from the 1 to the 4. It's the same thing. We're using it here, just everything down a half step to get from the 4 back to the 1. Exactly the same. And then I went, so while I've got my bar there, basically on the 5th fret 5th fret strings 1, 2, and 3, I do a hammer on between the 5th fret and 6th fret on the 3rd string, and then hit the 1 string behind the 5th fret. So all together, that's the lick, and that pulls us right back to the A. That's what that was building that A triad there. So hopefully you get that. That's the 3 spots that we're using the diminished chord in this. We're going from the 1 chord, playing the 1 sharp diminished 7 to get to the 4 chord. We're using the 4 sharp diminished 7 to get back to the 1. There's the 5 chord, back to the 4 sharp diminished 7 to get us back to the 1. And the last lick that we'll learn here goes, really cool little lick there. So I'm going to start with my pinky on the 8th fret 1st string, and we're going to slide up to the 9th fret. So that's minor pentatonic, sliding out up to the major. So that's your minor 3rd, major 3rd. And then 5th fret 1st string, 8th fret 2nd string. And then I'm going to play major pentatonic lick here, which would be 7th fret 1st string, 5th fret 1st string, back to the 8th fret 2nd string. So all together, after that 8th fret 2nd string, we're going to walk it down. So it's just a little box here between the 7th fret and the 5th fret. On the 2nd string, 3rd string, 4th string, down to the 5th string. So it's pretty simple. So you have, that's the lick. It's a great little turnaround lick. And sliding up there is a bluegrass lick that I've picked up from mandolin, but I'm using it on guitar now. This is another reason why it's good to cross-pollinate against different instruments. And then you're right in position for that 5 chord. Remember that lick though. That little slide with the pinky is just very cool. It's something I'm using a lot now. Okay, let me back up and play through everything that we've just covered one more time. Hopefully this is all making sense now and you see that it's not that hard. I've gone through the different spots where you play that diminished 7 chord and then how to connect it to something you know. So you need to know when to play it and then when to get out of it. And once you got that, it's just a matter of practice and getting those arpeggios down. All right, from the beginning, and then I'll see you in part 2 where we'll go over the second half. I actually changed the structure a little bit in the second half to give you as more of a traditional jazz. All right, so here's what we have.